Hi, welcome to Mortality with me. I'll just do a quick video version of my most recent post, Geography of Mortality, with regards to I'm looking at how much extra mortality or how much mortality increased over both 2020 and 2021. So mortality was high for both 2020 and 2021. And I'm including both years because a lot of states that missed the fun in 2020 got hit in 2021. And why not do a comparison for both years together? So let's do a comparison. Let me jump over to here so we just look at the map and not all my text around it. So this is a tile grid map. Yeah, I know it's, not perfect, but you can see all of the states, and DC has its own square here. Yes, I know it's not to the east of South Carolina. Deal. Um, the topography is a little weird, and yeah, things move around. It's approximate, and I did pick particular breakpoints. Um, I just picked particular breakpoints. Do not trust the North Carolina number. Some of this has to do with their data for 2021 are not complete. Um, okay, so what I did is I'm like, okay, let's just take as our baseline 2016 to 2019 average age adjusted death rate for that state. Okay. Before the pandemic, some of these states had age adjusted death rates that were trending upwards. Some had ones that were noisy, and a lot of times this is because they were a lower population state. And, there's some noise in their mortality experience, and some were trending downwards. Okay. Rather than try to measure excess mortality by continuing the trend and then trying to do an excess off of that, which is actually legitimate for saying this is excess mortality, it should have continued trending but it went up here. And then rather than just saying, okay, this is where it was in 2019 and this is how it changed, because some of these states, as I said, had a lot of noise, let's average it for that period, 2016 to 2019. And then let's take the period 2020 to 2021. And as I said, some states actually didn't get hit too bad in 2020, but got hit in 2021, and vice versa. And let's see what their overall mortality experience was like. How much did it go up? Average for 2020, 2021 versus the average before the pandemic. Okay, so the worst ones, I'm starting with the worst ones. So we can see New York, Mississippi, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and then Wyoming. Now, Wyoming is a low population area, so I don't know how much to credit this, but maybe this is the case. Because we see Montana, Nevada, Colorado, and South Dakota around it. So maybe this is a hot spot and, things are coming around it. But it looks like, southern border, we knew New York City got hit hard, and we see New Jersey right next to it in that initial 2020 hit and then coming out. So the worst ones with the biggest increase, along the border, New York and Wyoming, and then kind of the next out are kind of one off from these. So Florida, so along the south, around Wyoming, and then we have this Midwest cluster, and then New Jersey right next to New York, and Alaska. And then kind of most everybody's in this middle 10 to 15%. And this is a huge increase in mortality, by the way. As you may have heard various people talking about, this is just a very large increase overall. And especially because it's over a 2-year period. Even Spanish flu wasn't like this because Spanish flu really hit within a 1-year period. This is a 2-year hit where it's elevated for 2 years. This is a lot. Um, and then there were some areas that were actually kind of low. Don't trust North Carolina. Don't trust North Carolina. But Washington State, Hawaii, and then this upper like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and maybe Massachusetts, they do actually seem kind of low. So that was kind of interesting to see that they don't seem to have gotten hit so bad. So, that's kind of interesting. Now, I made ranking tables for this. So I did this for all causes. So this tile grid map and this ranking table are for this all cause increase. And remember these death rates, this age adjusted death rate, this is based off of the 2000 standard population weighting, blah, blah, blah. So that we're not, this is not the crude rate. So this might not, you may have seen a ranking table that differs from this because it's based off their crude, that means number of deaths divided by their population. This is the age adjusted death rate. So this is not being distorted by that there's a lot of old people in certain states. Okay, like there are a lot of old people in Arizona. So this is backing that out. Okay. So we're backing the out that there's a lot of old people who live in Arizona. Still, it had the worst increase at 24%. This is a 2-year impact. That's huge. Um, and we can see on the left and the right, some of these states started out at a much lower level or a much higher level than others. So I'm looking at the percentage change. When we're looking at Arizona, where it ended up for the 2020 to 2021 age adjusted death rate with that 24% increase is lower than where Mississippi started. And Mississippi, and yeah, like Mississippi and Louisiana, yeah, you can see Louisiana too, and Alabama. Those three right there along that Gulf Coast, yeah, they tend to be pretty low ranking on all sorts of measures, such as literacy and mortality results and obesity and all sorts of things. So it's hardly surprising, like they start out pretty bad, they end pretty bad. But you can see some of the places, so New York State, we knew, but it starts out relatively benign compared to these other states. It got hit really bad in 2020. And that's where most of this excess mortality is coming from for New York State. It's not really 2021 so much as 2020. Really pull up the average. It's in my underlying spreadsheet, which I'm not going to show here, of how this broke out 2020 versus 2021. So the 2020 2021, that's an average. So 2020 mortality for New York State was much higher than the 2021. But for some of these states, and we'll see this with the COVID ranking, they had a benign 2020 and a really bad 2021. And we'll see that like with Tennessee. So yeah, you can see this. I'm not going to show the rest of the ranking table. You can go to the blog post and see how that works. So now let's look at COVID. And again, I'm using age-adjusted mortality rates. And like, can you do that with cause of death? Absolutely, you can do age-adjusted death rates for cause of death. You can do it with anything except for when you do it at an age group. So age-adjusted death rates can be applied when you're doing like I want it for a state and a cause of death. You can do it for all sorts of things. As long as you're not breaking out the age groups. Now, so these are going to be much smaller numbers because it's not all causes, it's just COVID. And I'm averaging it over 2020 and 2021. Now, what's interesting about this, and you can see North Carolina here, you can actually trust the North Carolina numbers a little bit more. And you can see it's kind of between Virginia and South Carolina in its shade. The break points here, again, I was trying to pick something close to various quintiles that I was seeing for the states. But, it's kind of an art to pick the break points. Again, you see New York is a hot spot. Most of that is coming from 2020. Other states that we're seeing here, like Tennessee, that rate is actually mostly coming from 2021. So I'm not showing in this map. This is the average over 2020, 2021. So this is over the whole period of the 2 years. If I had animated this, like say by quarter or by month, yeah, this would definitely have a very different pattern over time. So you can see kind of in that Northwest, something maybe was going on with Nevada, Wyoming, South Dakota. We have along the southern border, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, something going on there. And then bordering states as well. Again, Hawaii, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, very low, relatively. And I don't know about Hawaii. Hawaii's an island. This is like with New Zealand. Maybe if you can control who comes in, who goes out, it's a little easier. Also, maybe amount of sun. I don't know how the Caribbean has fared. I haven't even looked at how has the Caribbean fared with COVID. But like with Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, what I'm thinking is perhaps what's involved is very, very, very low density living. Who knows? Talk about social distancing. Well, yell at somebody from 5 miles away. Um, it's definitely not like New York City. Um, anyway, I made a ranking table for this as well. Okay, so this is a little different in terms of the states, but not too different. And now you can see most of the states that we see on this top 10 had a worse 2021 than 2020, except for New York. And then Louisiana was kind of equally bad both years. Okay, most of these had a bad 2021, and I would say most of these, the bad 2021 was that fall Delta wave, where that was really bad, and a lot of people just, they focused on Florida and like, where's Florida? Well, I'm sorry, it was much worse in a lot of other states. Everyone focused on Florida for bad reasons, and maybe you should have focused on some other stuff other than Florida. Okay, guys? So Arizona got hit really bad. Okay? Maybe you should have paid attention to other stuff rather than, pay attention to the data. Think about it. Anyway, New York was very bad in 2020, and this is the entire state. I'm folding New York City in here just because it's easier the way I pull the data. I'm pulling it from Wonder. I'm not pulling it from one of the special COVID places. Um, in any case, you can see, and when you get into the ranking, a lot of these are very close to each other in terms of the rate. And when we start getting into differences for overall, and most of the excess mortality and most of the increase in mortality that we're seeing from the states is absolutely from COVID. Okay, guys, when you see an 18% increase in deaths, and most of it is old people, yeah, it's infectious disease that is, old people are more apt to. There are non-COVID causes of death that have increased, and I am investigating those. However, when you look at the actual numbers, those are dwarfed by the number of old people who have been killed by COVID. The reason why I'm focusing on some of these non-COVID causes of death is that younger people generally don't die very much. So it doesn't actually take that many extra younger people dying to have a huge effect on, say, life insurance. So it does have an outsized effect on my own industry. So that's one of the reasons that I pay a huge amount of attention. The other aspect, of course, is COVID goes away. Okay. But some of these other causes may not go away. Drug overdoses are bad and were bad before COVID hit. And if that doesn't go away, that's a problem. And then car crashes. Some of the proposals I've seen coming out of the Department of Transportation are ridiculous and I don't think will help. So that's another issue. I don't think it'll make it worse, but I just don't think it will help. That's all. Anyway, That's fun. So be looking out for me looking at motor vehicle accidents and drug overdoses in the weeks to come. See y'all.